Today we're going to be restoring this plastic gas tank that is just an absolute hunk of a junk. Someone spray painted it. It's got scrapes and scratches. We're going to fix all of that. So if you have been wanting to restore a plastic gas tank, keep on watching. By the end of it, this thing is going to be looking good as new. So as you can see, this paint job is just terrible. So we need to strip that first before we do anything else. And we're going to want to be in a well-ventilated area. Sometimes this oven cleaner is pretty nasty stuff. So the oven cleaner didn't really do much stripping of the paint. It might have just been the brand. I've had good luck with that in the past. So I had to find a different solution. I'm using Goof Off overspray remover. And this stuff, just spray it on. Let it soak for maybe 10-15 minutes. So you can see it's starting to bubble up right here. And as soon as we see most of that bubble up, I'm gonna take it outside and pressure wash it. This might take a couple coats. So I ended up having to use aircraft remover for the really stubborn parts on the tank. This stuff is super harsh and I didn't really want to use it because sometimes it can damage plastic, but ended up being fine on here. Honestly, I should have just started with this from the get-go, or like soaked the whole gas tank in gas, and that would have worked too. So now the goal with the tank is to remove all the scratches and bring out a nice shine. But before I do that, I'm going to clean up all the areas that are hidden on the tank, such as the bottom side and right here where the shroud covers. I want to start there because if I hit that later, I could potentially be scratching the areas that are nice and perfect. So what I'm going to do here is just clean it up with Scotch-Brite and degreaser and hopefully blend in a lot of these scratches and just get it to back to yellow. Now we can get to the meat of this project, which is actually refinishing the plastic here, taking out the scratches and getting a shine out of it. So we can either use a orbital sander. This is electric, an air sander. This is pretty quick for sanding. You can go by hand or even a drill. So lots of options here. And the kit we're going to be using is this one here. It has all the sandpaper, polishing wheels, polishing compound. This is going to take the plastic to a whole new level. So we're going to be starting with 320 grit here on the sander. There's some pretty deep scrapes here and it's going to take some serious sanding to get those out. So let's get started. And since we're going to be sanding here for quite some time, nice to have the tank on a nice stable surface, so it fits right over a sawhorse perfectly. So we're going to use a combination of dry and wet sanding. We're going to start with dry, and as the sandpaper clogs up, we're going to incorporate a little bit of water. And I'm going to start at the roughest areas here. So there's a big scrape here. Let's knock that down. As we get towards the bottom of the scratch, we're going to create broader strokes here, kind of blend it in with the rest of the tank. Sandpaper is getting a little clogged up now, so I'm going to spray some water on the tank and sand wet for a little bit, and that'll help free up the sandpaper again. So this is what the tank looks like after 320 grit. All the scratches are out, but unfortunately I noticed there's a bunch of these brown speckles and they will not sand out. I'm not sure what they are. It's like stains in the plastic. So that's just something we're gonna have to deal with on this tank. So as you're sanding, you're gonna wanna go side to side, back and forth, different patterns. That way the finish is as even as possible. And sometimes you have to use the edge of the sander to kind of knock out a scratch. But for the most part, you want to use the sander flat on the surface there. So another thing to note is when you're dry sanding, you want to wear a respirator so that way you're not breathing in those plastic particles. And also when you finish up with your dry sanding, you're going to want to follow that up with a wet sand and that'll kind of bring it to the next step. Actually, what we're gonna do now is check for any scratches, and we're gonna do that with a guide coat. Now for the guide coat, we're gonna be using this charcoal powder that comes with the kit. Spray down the tank, sprinkle a little powder, kind of rub that in. And what this is gonna do is go into those scratches and expose them so that way we can see where they're at. Yeah, a little goes a long way with this charcoal. So you can start to see some of these scratches coming through, like right here. That scratch there will be visible unless we take care of it right now. Got another scratch right here. So let's hit this thing again with the electric sander. Now honestly, you can skip the 320 grit if you don't have deep scratches like this side of the tank had. So on the other side, if you see just minor scratches in your part that you're working with, you don't need the 320. And if you don't have any scratches at all, or just like tiny little scuffs, you can actually go right to 600. So that'll save you some time. The 320 is really only for the deep stuff. Now with the 400, this is a very critical step. You want to spend plenty of time going around the tank to get all the scratches out from the 320, because that is really going to show in the finished piece if you don't knock those out. And for all the grits remaining, we're going to be wet sanding only. And it helps to have a little dish soap in your water, helps stick to the tank better. So I spent about 3 to 4 minutes on this side of the tank with the 400 grit, and then from here on, from 600 up to 2000 grit, you only really need to spend 1 to 2 minutes for this size of a piece. It's not as crucial as it is with the 400 grit. All right, I've got the tank sanded up to 2000 grit, and as I got into the higher grits, I went lighter with the pressure and just try to be really uniform with it. So now we're ready to polish this thing out and get some shine out of it. But before I do that, I'm going to spray it down with isopropyl alcohol. And this is just gonna remove any residue, grittiness, just a nice clean before polishing. So now for the polishing step, we have these polishing wheels. These are very unique. It's like looks like a sprocket. And on one of the wheels, we're gonna use a polishing compound. So basically what the polishing step is, it will remove some of the finer scratches here, and also how it brings the shine back is it lightly melts the very top layer of the plastic. And so that is what these wheels are doing. You just need really light pressure, and it kind of buffs the shine back into it. So let's get buffing. So when you're buffing a larger part like this, it helps to have a buffer that has an extended shaft like this one here, or you can do a shaft extension. So this just screws onto the existing shaft and gives you an extra 4 inches of shaft. Everyone likes that. So we're gonna spin up the wheel and apply the compound. 2 to 3 seconds is all it takes. And we're just gonna start with a really light pressure. And you're gonna wanna go in all directions, side to side, this way, kind of up and down. That'll create the most uniform finish. And then every few minutes, apply some more compound. And another thing to note too, you want to have the wheel spinning away from any edges like this. If you go towards an edge, it'll catch it and burn the plastic. So after the first stage of polishing, you can see that shine starting to come back. And you're gonna wanna look for any scratches left behind, because now would be the time to knock those out. Looks like we're sitting pretty good. I'm gonna go for the final polish on it. And this is a very important step after the first stage of polishing. You're gonna wanna spray it down with IPA and get all of that compound off of there, or else you won't get the full shine out of it. Now for the second stage of polishing, we're going to be using the second polishing wheel here, but with no compound. That's why there's two wheels with the kit, one with compound, one without, and you don't want to mix them up. All right, let's get buffing on this thing. So again, we're going to use really light pressure here, and you don't want to have the wheel sit in one spot for too long, and then change directions. Now if you see any sanding scratches coming through, you can go back to the first stage of polishing with the compound and knock those out. This is looking pretty good. Hit it with a little different angle. So you can even change up the speed at which you're going. You can go really slow. If you're doing this, you want to use light pressure. Basically just buff it until you get a really nice shine out of it. Sometimes it'll take some work to get that shine to come out, but eventually it will come through if you've done the work ahead of time. And then to get a nice consistent shine, just go over the whole piece once you're done. And that is it. Man, that dent's really pissing me off. Now you can use these polishing wheels on a bench grinder up to 3600 RPM, and it will work best on a bench grinder. That way you have the most control over the part. You can use these wheels on a drill, although you don't have, like I said, as much control. You can accidentally burn it with too much pressure. Whatever tool you got, you can work with it, but I would definitely recommend a bench grinder. After the second stage of polishing, I'm gonna give it a wipe down with the IPA once again. This will get the last little bit of shine out of it in case there's any residue left behind. Man, that is beautiful. Look at this side compared to before. That is insane. So I'm gonna call this side good, and we're gonna move on to the right side of the tank. This is probably in a little bit better shape. There's not as deep of scratches, so shouldn't take quite as long. But as you can imagine, a process like this does not happen quickly. It definitely takes some time and patience. So if you are going to polish out a tank or any piece, you want to make sure it is a piece that's actually worth doing it to. You don't want to do it to like a fender, because you can probably buy a new one for $30, but for something like this, it's expensive to buy a new one. Now, one more thing I wanted to add was, if you're gonna do this, test out a garbage piece first. That way you can make your mistakes on something that doesn't matter rather than your finished piece. As you can see, I did make a few mistakes here, even though, you know, I did run through a few test pieces, but there's always more to learn. And I'm sure you guys are curious as far as the time commitment into something like this. I would say this side, total work hours are probably somewhere around like 2. So for the full tank, 3 to 4 hours, I would say. But that can definitely be sped up once you get dialed in with the process. And as you're going through the process, make sure you do every single step. If you skip a single step, that could be the difference between having a dull finish and a bright finish, or a bunch of scratches left behind. So definitely take your time with it if you're going to commit to something like this. But let's get going on this side. got the right side of the tank done. Man, this is beautiful. Turned out a lot better than the left side. But if you don't look like this when you're done buffing, you haven't buffed hard enough. So definitely took some time on this side. I want to say it was about an hour and a half total. So a little quicker than the other side. Just had the process dialed in a little better. But the most time consuming part was the first stage of sanding. So blending in all those scratches took me about 50 minutes. So if you can be patient with that step, the rest of it will be pretty straightforward. So on some tanks, you'll notice they have kind of a casting line or molding line. And I was able to sand that out and get that smoothed out. So just an idea for you guys. It used to look like this right here, so it makes it look a lot cleaner. And then one tip I feel like made a big difference on this side compared to the other was I was really cautious about the sandpaper and keeping it clean. If just one little piece of debris gets underneath that sandpaper, it can kind of scratch up the finish as you're sanding. And something else I want to touch on too, and a mistake that I made was with the drill. So on the left side, as I showed you guys earlier, I made a gouge right here, and that was actually with a drill. I just kind of lost patience with a scratch right here and decided to bust the drill out. And I did not have the foam piece on the drill here. So it is very important to have that on there, or else it'll gouge super easily. And this foam piece is actually included with the drill kit. So make sure you have that on there at all times. And like I mentioned earlier, it is recommended to put the polishing wheel on a bench grinder. You have a lot more control that way, but it is possible to put it on a drill such as this one. It just needs to go up to around, I think this one goes up to 3,000 RPM. You need a little bit higher speed to actually kind of buff the plastic. So if you're gonna mount one of these on a drill, all you need is this drill adapter piece. And I think at the beginning of the video, I mentioned hand sanding as well. So that is an option. It is gonna take a lot longer if you decide to hand sand and not machine sand. So there is an option on the website to purchase this kit for a hand type sanding as well. And while we're on that subject, the fastest way to actually sand out the tank, I would say, is gonna be DA, and you're gonna have a lot more speed, and also it is way more comfortable, this palming it like that versus the other sander is heavier. So if you have a good air compressor, definitely pick up one of these. I think they're only like $20 to $30 at Harbor Freight. And then the second fastest way to sand is with this electric palm sander. It is a little bit slower. It's a 5-inch compared to a 6-inch here. So that's a decent kit. The drill is definitely gonna take some time, although it is doable. This is only a 3-inch, so it doesn't cover as much surface area, and the finish honestly isn't gonna be quite as consistent because it's doesn't have the surface area. And then obviously you can sand, but that's gonna take forever, but it is an option too. So some of you guys might wonder, does this kit work on white or black plastics? Well, I'll show you on black, which is obviously gonna be the hardest color to polish. This was before and that's after. So it works awesome on black, as you can see. It does take more time, I would say. You have to make sure everything is perfect. And then we've got white. It's gonna be tough to see that finish there, but as you can see, works beautifully on white as well. Thought I'd show you guys what a polishing wheel does on a drill, on a used fender. Not gonna do any sanding here, just have a few light scuffs on this fender. Turns out pretty solid, just like new. But speaking of that, let's go test this wheel on a brand new piece of plastic. So I've got a new side plate here. Let's see what the polishing wheel does in comparison to a new finish. Peel the tape and see the difference. Wow. Guess you could say it's actually better than a new finish. So as we were testing these wheels, I noticed they actually work pretty good on worn out graphics, like scratched up graphics too. I'll show you guys. Not bad. Doesn't completely restore it, but at least gets the shine back in it. So if you guys are interested in tackling a project like this polishing kit, all the sandpaper is scattered across the table, but this thing was the ticket. Like I said, it came with all the sandpaper from 320 grit up to 2000, 2 polishing wheels, a polishing compound, the charcoal guide coat, and then there's also kits available for drills, 5-inch sanders, 6-inch sanders, hand sanders. So pretty wide variety there. But this was a kit that Nick and I actually have been working on for the last year. We tested all sorts of different grits, all sorts of different wheels, and we could never get a good shine once we were done sanding. And so we actually had to come up with our own wheel here. And so basically how this started, we had a bunch of different wheels and we just started cutting them up, different designs, different shapes, different diameters, thicknesses, and this is what we came up with. And you definitely will not be disappointed with this kit. I think with some patience, some definitely elbow grease, you guys can get a finish just like this, which like we saw on the side panel here, it is better than a new finish. So anyways, I want to share this story with you guys, how I got into plastic polishing or just polishing in general. About 15 years ago, I was like 14 years old, 13 years old or something. And my dad and I bought out all the gas tanks, plastic gas tanks from a salvage yard, and they had been sitting outside for who knows how long, probably 10 plus years. And you guys have seen plastic that sits outside. It gets really oxidized, has that white layer, just chalky layer on it. And I wanted to find a way to polish those plastics, those gas tanks up and sell them. And actually, I think I ended up with, there's close to 200 of them. And I spent a whole summer working on those gas tanks. This was freshman year of high school at the time. And on my summer break, I spent the entire summer polishing plastic gas tanks and selling them on eBay. And so that was kind of my introduction into polishing, and I started with plastics. And so past that summer that I was polishing plastics, I never touched plastic polishing again until this past year. And I thought, why not come up with a kit so that other people can do the same? I mean, back in the day, I was literally hand sanding all the tanks, but I definitely did not have a system like this to where you can get a perfect finish without a single scratch. And so anyways, that's my my little story of how I got into plastic polishing and came to developing this kit. Anyways, hope this video helped you guys out in restoring those old beat up gas tanks. And let me know if you have any questions about this process. I tried to cover it all here, but it's pretty technical, so I'm sure I missed something. So now with the tank completely finished off, you want to clean out the inside, wash that out just in case there is any sanding, dust, or grime in there. I need to still do that on this tank. And if you want to protect the finish, there's a few different options. I personally would recommend this ceramic paint sealer. It actually works pretty well on plastics. I tested it on a different piece. I'm actually not going to use it on this tank because I'll be doing some decals on here, and I want that to stick as good as possible. You might be tempted to use like a clear coat. I would not do that. I would not spray a clear coat on this. It does not stick very well to plastic, especially polished plastic. There's really not much for it to adhere to, so stay away from that. But there's some other ceramic sealants on the market that would work pretty good too. Tank's all washed out. Now I'm gonna get it ready to bolt on the bike. I've got a petcock here that I cleaned up, all the mounts and straps, so let's get this thing dialed in. As you're sliding the tank on, you want to make sure everything's tucked pretty well up underneath. No cables, no wires are getting pinched. All that looks good. 3-liter hose is a little tight going up in there. Good old Chinese hoses. I don't think that'll be an issue though. It doesn't look like it's pinched. Yeah, that'll be fine. Got something special to top it off. Billet gas cap. This one is from Tusk. Then you got a little ball tickler right here. Oh yeah, that looks super clean on there. All right, we're at a pretty good point with this bike. Pretty much just got to bolt on plastics and seat and we're all good to go. So stay tuned for the next videos. We're gonna be doing up, like I said, the plastics, doing some pretty sweet graphics for this thing. A new seat cover on there, and then also starting it up, which honestly, I could probably just start it up right now and just need to add fluids, but we'll save that for the next video. So anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you got something out of this video with the gas tank restoration. And like I said, if you have any questions about this process or you'd like to learn more, head over to the website. There's a lot of content on there on restoring plastic, and the kit is available over on that site as well. So see you guys in the next video. We're gonna be doing some cool stuff with this RM.